Hey guys, it's Roy. Today we're going to look at something that may be one of the most important decisions you make for your business. It's how you build your website. So we're going to look at two of the most common platforms, one that you may not have heard of that is probably worth a look. And we're going to kind of compare and match the features and so you can help decide what might be right for you. All right, let's dive in. All right, so the one that you've probably heard of before is Wix. Wix is everywhere. They have, a huge amount of users and websites using them. They have ads all over the place, so you probably have heard about it. It is a solid platform, especially for those companies that are just starting out, that want to try to do it themselves. It is also a decent platform for professional agencies and web designers to use. There's a lot of flexibility about how to build your site. And we're going to take a look at that real quick, some of the features and usability of that. The other platform that we're going to look at today is Duda. And Duda.co, you probably haven't heard of as much, but there are a ton of agencies using Duda because the backend has really been historically more friendly for agencies to manage multiple websites and multiple clients and give different access to different clients and actually give them tools to look at their analytics and stuff like that. Wix has recently done a lot of work to do that as well. And that's what you're seeing here is the Wix Studio, where you can see like a lot of the interface where an agency could actually have multiple sites. They don't get charged until they launch the site, and it allows them to manage these sites. I will say that the interface between the two is a little bit different, and it is sometimes a little bit easier to use the Duda agency setup for this, where you can have a little bit more control over the sites and the clients that are viewing them and that kind of stuff. But Wix has made good strides in that area. The other third product that we're going to look at is probably the most common, and it's WordPress. And we're going to talk about that a little bit because WordPress is really not a website builder. WordPress is an open source tool that you can then put plugins on that, initially WordPress was geared for blogging. It was purely a blogging platform. And you can still do great blogging with WordPress. But really to do website building and to do that type of thing, you have to have plugins and you have to have website builders and themes and that kind of stuff to allow you to do that. So it's not the same as the other two that we're looking at, in that you also have to go find hosting, you have to find the plugins that you want to use, the themes that you want to use, and there are tens of thousands of them. So there's themes for everything, there's plugins and themes for everything you can imagine. But part of the problem with that is it's kind of the Wild West. So WordPress sites are hacked quite often. And we're going to take a look at some of the problems with that and why it's a little bit more difficult to build a site using WordPress than some of these other options. And I know there's going to be a lot of comments from people that love WordPress, and that's great because they're used to it. It's what they've experienced. It's what they've been doing for the last 15 years. They love WordPress. They love the ability to have all those different plugins, and there is a benefit to that. But from a turn around a site, manage a site perspective, I think it's a distant third to some of the other tools that we're looking at today. All right, so let's take a look at Wix first. Here we can go in and you create a new site. And what's interesting with the Wix setup is that you can either start from a blank canvas, start with a template, and it also does have an AI capability. So if you were in the agency view of this, so it doesn't offer us that right away, but what it does, if you're a consumer and you just want to start your own website, it actually has AI. So it'll ask you a series of questions and that kind of stuff, and it'll help you essentially build your site, or at least give you a skeleton of a site without a lot of heavy lifting. And so it's going to create that for you. Obviously, that's super handy if you don't know anything about websites. But if you want to have more control over it and that kind of stuff, and really have more creativity and make your site unique, AI is great, but there are limitations. So from the Wix starting point, what it does is it asks you to start with a theme, or like I said, we could have started with a blank canvas. You can search by types and industries and that kind of stuff. The theme is then adjustable, so that's just a shell for you to start building your site, right? Because you can then go in and adjust all your pictures and images and colors and fonts and all that stuff. But this just gives you a shell, so you can kind of go through and say, hey, I kind of like the way this looks. I like the vibe of it. I like how it's laid out. I like the footer or the header or the navigation. And so you can go through and check. Now, Wix has a lot of themes, and it has a huge selection to choose from, almost too many. The one thing that I will say, though, is one of the differences between Wix and Duda is Wix's themes are not as responsive as Duda's out of the gate. So, and what I mean by that is that they don't adjust as easily to mobile and desktop during the design process and when people are viewing them. So it takes a little bit more effort to make sure that they're working correctly. So let's just choose one here just for the sake of this discussion. So here's one that you can see it's already kind of put together, and then we can go in and edit the template, and that's going to add it to our Wix Studio. Okay, and so now we have an editable site, and so we can go into the various sections of the site. We can change these, we can adjust them. You can see there's options over on the right-hand side for adjusting the size and width of certain elements. You can click on the navigation and manage that separately. And again, it's all very clearly over here, set up clearly over here where those adjustments can be made. We can go in and click on the text and change the text. Okay. And adjust that as needed, so we can change the stylings and all that kind of stuff, right? You can also click on the button, adjust that. You can arrange the layout of the button where that lines up. So I could, say I want it to align left, or I want it to align right, or I can center it, right? The other thing that you can do historically in Wix is I can also then freeform this. I can say, no, I want to move this around, so I don't want it to be in a specific area. And it gives you a little bit more flexibility for that historically, and we'll take a look at why I say historically. There's different elements over here, so you can add different layers, and you can see how this is broken out. This is the structure of the site, and so you can go through and change these different cells that have different things in the cells, and have a lot of control about this. So I can easily go in, for instance, and swap things. So if I have the intro here, I could theoretically then move the clients above it if I wanted to, and that puts the intro below, right? So you can easily move things around on the page if you want to change sections or where those are, okay? So they also have, different navigation and page setup, so you can go to the different pages to work on those. And you can see here, you can add pages. And so that lets you then easily navigate through the site and add those. There's other sections. There's images and that type of stuff that you can set up. There are apps, and there's a very sizable app market that is similar to WordPress plugins in that it gives you advanced capabilities to do things. So like whether that's menus or whatever, forms and QR codes and, commenting and all that kind of stuff, reviews, all of that is possible through adding these things, which will expand the capabilities of your site. Okay. You can also do blogging. So you can set up your blog on here, create blog pages, that kind of stuff. So as you can see, this is extremely flexible. There's a lot that you can do without needing to know code. You don't have to go in and do any kind of coding or any kind of, needing to know CSS or HTML or anything like that. You can just very easily make changes to your site. So you can go in and design this, change your sections or the text on your sections, that kind of stuff. Now, Wix also has commerce capability, and it also has a content management system capability, and that's where it can work from a database to create dynamic pages. We're not going to get into that, but just that is a capability. So once you have all of that, obviously you can share this with clients and that kind of stuff. You can then choose to publish it. You can share it with your team to have them take a look at it. You can say, hey, let's publish this. Like some of the other platforms, you can go in and see how this will look on different tools. Okay. And so you can make sure that it's going to look right on mobile and that it's going to look right on desktop. Okay. And so you can change things in here to, scale proportionally, to wrap, make it fixed, that type of stuff, to make sure that it's appearing correctly on your different devices. Okay. Much like on other systems, you can change a lot of these settings in here. You can, align things differently, all of that kind of stuff. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of things you can do. So let's take a look at Duda real quick. Duda has recently just launched their new 2.0 editor, and you're going to notice some similarities. So let's start building with this one. And similar thing. So this is the new Duda editor. This is now just really launching right now. But what you're going to notice is some similarities. So we're going to click on an element on the page, and you have a right column of features and things that you can adjust. There are similar ways that you can look at this, the layers of the site, so that you can, just like we saw in Wix, where you can move these around. You can click on the area that you want to edit and have control over that area. Okay. But where I like what Duda does is it really looks at the page breaks and stuff better than with Wix. And what I mean by the page breaks is where, depending on your monitor size, it's going to adjust the design based on that size. And so you can design for the desktop, which then cascades down to the other devices, tablet and mobile. But then if I think something looks better on mobile, I can adjust it here. So I adjusted that button. If I go back to the desktop, the button's the same size, but now I've changed it for mobile, so it lays out better. And you can do that with any number of things on here. So you can change the arrangement, you can change the layout, that kind of stuff. One of the other things that they've done on the new Duda layout is that you can add, you have more control over the interior of the columns and stuff in your layout, and the objects in the layout, so that you can actually overlay things. So you can get more creative with overlaying images and text box and that kind of stuff, and actually stacking them and layering them so that you have a lot more creativity. So this is a big step for them. This is, we're just starting to play with this because it is relatively new, the 2.0 editor. But it is going to give a lot more flexibility to designers, and makes your site look a lot more professional if you do it correctly. So you can see here, though, that they have the different grids and stacking and stuff like that. And honestly, it's very similar to another tool that we'll look at in the future, is Webflow, where I think a lot of these platforms are looking at some of that kind of functionality and adding it. So again, you don't have to know any code. You don't have to know CSS and that kind of stuff to make your site start looking great. And so you can actually adjust these very easily. So for instance, in this situation, I can move this over with just a click of the button. I don't have to drag anything. I can change all of those. I can change the alignments. I can change the spacing between the elements, within that cell that I just selected. the flexibility here is great. I think at this, when you look at the Wix and Duda interfaces, I think it's a little cleaner on Duda, but they're very similar. Like there's not a lot of gap between these two, so they're pretty similar. So Duda also has the blogging capabilities, just like Wix does, and like WordPress. It also has a commerce capability, and it also has the CMS capability. You can create dynamic pages by uploading spreadsheets. You can even connect it to offline spreadsheets or Google Sheets using other tools. But there is built-in CMS in this that allows you to do, for instance, if you have a lot of employees, you can create a lot of different pages dynamically just by updating a spreadsheet or by the built-in spreadsheet in the system. If you're a realty company or a multifamily company, something like that, you can set up multiple pages that are dynamically generated through data. So that is super handy. Again, Wix does that as well. So that is something that is great if you have, lots of pages that you need to create en masse that you don't want to have to do dynamically and manage dynamically and make changes and all that kind of stuff. So that's always good. Duda's web store is always growing. So it is not as big as Wix's app store, but there are always growing apps that they're adding to this, connectors, data connectors, tools, and that kind of stuff. So it is expanding and growing very rapidly. For most companies, you're probably going to have what you need in there. We have a number of our clients using Duda, and we really haven't, run into anything that's like hugely missing, but it is a growing platform. So it's one of those things that will continue to grow. Like I said, Wix has more, and they have more themes, but I haven't found the need for huge number of themes because we always are modifying them anyway. It's just really a shell to start with. So having 1,000 themes compared to 200 or something like that really isn't that big a deal. The dashboard for clients, like I said, is helpful. And we have, like, our site is actually run on Duda today. We're not yet using the 2.0 editor. We'll probably move over to that at some point. But we'll have to create a new website to do that. It does have, when you get in here, you have quite a number of widgets that you can use and that kind of stuff, and pre-made areas, even in the old editor. So sites that were made on the old editor will still be maintained in the old editor, and sites going forward will use the new Duda editor, where you can have a lot more flexibility, and it's this new interface. All right, so let's touch on WordPress. So one of the reasons we talk about WordPress is because it is a incredibly popular platform for website development. There are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of websites built on WordPress, which is good and bad. So one of the good things for that is that there is a huge number of plugins, there's a huge number of themes, there's lots of tools that integrate with WordPress. There's tons of people that know WordPress. So if you're looking for people to help maintain your site or to work on your site, or experts who can, do things with your site, there's a ton of them. But it also gets hacked a lot. So because it's one of those sites where it's one of those platforms that it is dependent on plugins. And so just wanted to show you this. This is a great example of a site that we often run into where we go in and the owners of the site have not kept it up to date. And so, it will have numerous updates to the theme. Licenses are expiring. There's stuff that's out of date. The plugins are not updated. So you can see there's all these updates that haven't been added. They're out of date. And what happens with that is that there are security risks, because one of the reasons that a lot of these apps are updated is because maybe a hacker found a hole, or maybe they're not performing very well, and that kind of stuff. So managing a WordPress site becomes more problematic because you have to find hosting. You have to find the plugins that you want, buy the right plugins. Hopefully those plugins are going to be continue to be supported, that whoever developed it doesn't go away. Hopefully when there's WordPress updates, those plugins are going to continue to be supported and it doesn't break your site. That happens all the time. We had in the past had numerous clients using WordPress, and if there's a new WordPress update, suddenly a lot of plugins don't work and the site can break and the functionality of the site can break. And so, it causes a lot of problems. The apps and add-ons in Duda and Wix are much more vetted by those companies and much more supported. So you don't have the problems with breakage and that kind of stuff, or, just a company going away that's no longer there supporting that app. So now you have to go find something new. You have to, in some cases, redevelop parts of your site, that kind of stuff. So that's one of the reasons why we typically push clients away from using WordPress, because just the management of it and the fact that you need to go buy another tool to actually develop the actual website pages, to build those pages, it takes a third-party tool. So WordPress is the platform, but there's all sorts of other stuff that you have to add on to it. And all of that adds to the time for development and it adds for time for maintenance. So that's why we generally prefer other platforms like Duda and like Wix, or Webflow, and there's a number of other like that. But we definitely do tend to steer away from WordPress because of that. Now let's talk a little bit about other things that these sites bring. So performance. So SEO is a big topic, obviously, and it's one of those things that is extremely important for your company. So let's take a look at that. We'll take a look on our site. And you can actually go into the SEO and settings. And one of the nice things that Duda has right now is that if, for instance, we made some updates to our site, there was a lot of image alt tags and stuff like that missing. And they actually have an AI tool that will go in and create those alt tags for you based on what the image is there. So we had it go through our site and do that just to make sure that everything had an alt tag. And then we can go through and clean that up and make sure that those alt tags are correct. But it's better than having nothing. And so that is one nice thing. So they do have the new SEO AI tool that is extremely handy. But basically you have the ability to go in and manage the title tags and that type of stuff on every page in your site. So for instance, if we have a page here, we can go in and manage that SEO, and we can work on the title tags, we can work on the meta descriptions, the alt tags, all that kind of stuff. And it has now the AI assistant built in so that you can try to optimize those title tags and stuff like that. Wix has some similar things. It gives you the ability to manage those title tags and stuff like that. WordPress is generally, people depend on plugins for that, like Yoast and stuff, which they're not bad, but they're another paid plugin, and they have some questionable impact. As far as page speed, which is another big indicator for quality of SEO for a website. It's an indicator for Google about the quality of your website. This is a Looker Studio chart that you can compare the core web vitals, which is what Google Search Console tracks, for page speed. So it looks at the different elements on your site and how quickly they load on your site. It measures that. And so I plugged in here WordPress, Wix, and Duda, and you can see that as far as the ranking, that Duda is ranking a little bit higher than Wix, quite a bit higher, and significantly higher than the average WordPress site. And there's a lot of different elements that goes into this, right? So it's, things like image size, it could be JavaScript, it could be plugins that you're using, it could be all that stuff. So this is not, just something you can say, oh, WordPress is worse. But there are a lot of plugins, and depending on how people are developing their sites, where they're hosting them, that kind of stuff is all going to impact this. And so one of the things that you get from using a platform like Duda or Wix is you are getting stuff that is continually optimized for SEO. And the new Duda editor, the 2.0 editor, is specifically geared for having better Google Search Console Web Vital feedback from Google, which is going to help you rank a little bit better. That being said, obviously those are things that you can tweak and modify for your individual site, but having a platform that you don't have to pay for a tool to optimize your site is great. So that is something that you need to consider when you're looking at what site what platform your site's going to be on. All right, so let's talk about pricing. So pricing for Duda and Wix is similar. So if you go to the Wix premium plans, and there are different things that they have on here for you. So if you were to use, for instance, the business one, which has up to 10 collaborators and blah blah blah, you're looking at about $36 a month. They do have 100 gigabyte storage space limit, but they do have e-commerce built into that business level. They have basic e-commerce, which I think limits the number of products that you can have, that kind of stuff. And you only get about 50 gigabytes of storage with 5 collaborators. Okay, so that is their pricing. If we take a look at Duda's pricing real quick, it's kind of all over the place here. So their basic pricing is $19 a month. Team is $29. Agency will give you more of a scale, and then white label is going to let you do what white label would imply, which is add your own branding and that kind of stuff. You can do site exports. You can have the entire platform white labeled so it doesn't look like Duda, it looks like yours, which is actually what we do for our clients, so that they know we're working on that for them. So that is $149 a month for just that, and it gives you 4 sites built into that with AWS hosting, which is faster than you're going to get for some other platforms. You will notice that they're not talking about limits on what the hosting is, the megabytes. So that is not necessarily limited here. So you do have limitations on Wix with their pricing based on storage, which in Duda you don't have. So you do have you can add unlimited sites, but each of those sites do cost money. So if you have this base price, and then for each additional site that you add, there is an additional cost to that. But it is easy to manage, and you can do that within their system. You can do those sites either monthly or yearly. It's cheaper to do the yearly. And so you can see that the pricing is similar, but you do have limitations. So if you want 10 collaborators, it's $36 over there. If you want, you can have 6 team members for $52. So that's a little bit different. Now the nice thing is you do have dynamic pages capability for these levels, and then it expands as you go forward. So for WordPress, the pricing's all over the place, right? Because you may pay only $5 or $10 a month to host it on a shared server that probably isn't the best. But you're also adding on the cost of all those plugins per month. So if you want to do e-commerce, if you want to have Yoast, if you want to do any of those security plugins, page backups, page copying, if you want to copy a page in WordPress and duplicate it, you have to have a plugin to do that. So there's all sorts of incidental fees that go into that you're not going to have with some of these with these other platforms. Now, adding e-commerce to both Wix and Duda does cost a little bit extra. But so if that's something you want to do, and there are different limits to the number of products you can have and stuff like that. And while that basic e-commerce is a nice to have, it's obviously not their main focus. If you are a retailer that's looking for something specifically for retail, I don't know that we would recommend either of those platforms for a full-on retail site. But if you happen to sell some stuff, like maybe it's a book or maybe it's a download or that type of stuff that you want to be able to sell from your company, then that's a good option as well. So recommendations. We use Duda ourselves for our clients and for our website. I find that we can get sites launched very quickly and affordably, and there is decent customer support. So they don't have the customer support on the weekends necessarily, but they're relatively responsive. We've worked with them on a number of different things, and Duda has good support. Wix, from our experience, has questionable support. And so that's not it's one of the reasons why we choose to use Duda, is because it is more responsive and stuff. But Wix is making some good strides. They're changing their platforms, they're adding tools, they're getting into AI and that kind of stuff as well. So, they're very similar tools. And I think what you should look at is how comfortable you feel inside the platforms and doing what you need to do. Wix is obviously the bigger company as far as the number of people using it and the amount of advertising they do. It's all over the place. But just because somebody's advertising a lot doesn't mean it's the best platform for you. So if you haven't looked at Duda, I encourage you to. We're not getting any, they're not sponsoring us or anything like that. We're not getting any kickback for mentioning them. It's just what we happen to use. We don't make any money from sending you to their website or anything like that. So just so you know, this is purely my opinion. And but Wix is also a strong tool, and it's something that we have used with our clients in the past. We do have clients still using it, and they are making advancements with that tool as well. I think they're both strong tools. I would not recommend WordPress, particularly since their ongoing battle with WP Engine, which is another video, but there are thousands of WordPress WP Engine clients that have been impacted, and there's legal wrangling going on and stuff. So it just makes us even more determined not to send clients in that direction. So at the end of the day, we really like Duda. We find it a little bit easier to use. We have the better white labeling capability for it, and that type of stuff. So it's what we typically recommend. However, we wouldn't steer anyone away from Wix if they were dead set on that, because it's a good tool as well. So love to hear your opinion about what website you're using. Obviously, there's other builders out there that are great as well, and we'll be touching on some of those in the future. But in the meantime, would love to hear your comments. What are you using for your websites? What have you found that you really enjoy about any of these platforms? Do you think we're wrong on any of this? I'd love to hear your comments. So if you need help setting up a website or helping choose the right platform, or you need some website design help, give us a holler. Our contact information is in the description. We'd love to work with you. You can also set up a 30-minute consultation, if I could speak correctly. You could set up a 30-minute consultation with us. I'll put a link in there as well, and that's free too, where you can talk about this or any other topic that you'd like to talk about. Hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.